The light within the grand chamber of the concordance was the color of a dying star, a soft, amber luminescence that had bathed this hall for 1,000 continuous years. It flowed from the crystalline core suspended high above, a relic of a forgotten technology that pulsed with the slow, rhythmic beat of a leviathan's heart. Below it, the air was thick with the weight of history and the heavier burden of an impending, unthinkable decision. Polished obsidian floors reflected the myriad forms of the delegates, the towering, carapaced Cathar, their chitinous armor gleaming like wet stone, the ethereal, shimmering lumina, beings of coherent light held within faintly humming containment fields, the ancient, gnarled Silthrin, whose bark-like skin was covered in mosses that chronicled their lineage. Dozens of other species, representatives from every known power in the charted arms of the galaxy, occupied their designated alcoves, their collective silence a testament to the gravity of the moment. For the first time since the Age of Ash, when the galaxy had burned under the fires of a war so total it had shattered moons and boiled away oceans, the Concordance was considering its breaking. The 3 millennia conquered, the sacred pact of non-aggression that had defined their civilization, was poised to be undone by a ghost. High Lord Vorlag of the Cathar stood at the center of the chamber, his immense form casting a long, sharp shadow that seemed to cut across the assembly. His voice, a low grinding of rocks, filled the cavernous space, each word a percussive blow against the hallowed silence. For cycles we have watched them, we have listened, and what have we learned? Nothing. They exist behind a veil of impenetrable energy, a shroud of shimmering chaos they call their Sol system. They have not answered our hails. They have not sent emissaries. They have not acknowledged the laws of this galaxy, the very laws that have granted us 3,000 years of unbroken peace. They are a void in our understanding, a silence where there should be dialogue, a wall where there should be a door. He gestured with a massive, four-jointed arm towards the central holographic display. There, suspended in the amber light, was a perfect rendition of the anomaly. It was not the familiar, orderly swirl of a star system. It was a sphere of roiling, iridescent light, beautiful and terrifying. It looked less like a territory and more like a wound in spacetime. Within it, sensors could detect a single G-type star and its planets, but the readings were distorted, fragmented, as if viewed through a shattered lens. This was the home of the species known as humanity. The Lumina counsel patience, Vorlag continued, his multifaceted eyes swiveling to fix upon the floating form of Speaker Xylos. They speak of caution, of gathering more data, but what data can be gathered from a locked room? The Silthrin remind us of the old wars, of the cost of aggression. Their wisdom is etched into the very foundation of this concordance. But they forget that the greatest wars are not born from aggression, but from fear of the unknown. And these, humans, they are the ultimate unknown. They sing into the void, and their song is a mystery. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The song was the most unsettling piece of the puzzle. A constant, complex stream of electromagnetic radiation emanated from the veil of Sol. It was not a communication signal in any recognizable form. It lacked the mathematical purity of a beacon or the structured data of a transmission. It was a cascade of harmonious frequencies, intricate and layered, with the emotional resonance of music. The Concordance archives had no precedent for it. It was art, broadcast with the power of a small star. To the Cathar, a warrior race that saw strategy in every shadow, this was the most insidious deception of all. A song, Vorlag sneered, the sound a low rumble. Do you believe that? A species capable of weaving a shield of pure energy that our deepest scans cannot penetrate, and they use their resources to sing? No, it is a weapon. A psychic frequency designed to dull our senses, to lull us into a false sense of security. Or it is a camouflage, a beautiful noise to mask the sounds of industry, of shipbuilding, of the forging of a fleet meant to break upon our worlds like a silent, unstoppable tide. Their silence is not peaceful. It is the silence of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Speaker Xylos of the Lumina drifted forward, its crystalline form coalescing into a more focused, humanoid shape. Its voice was not spoken, but resonated directly in the minds of all present, a chord of pure logic and calm inquiry. High Lord Vorlag, your interpretation is predicated entirely on fear. You present no evidence of hostile intent. You have recorded no fleet movements, no weapons deployments, no territorial expansion. The humans have remained within their sci-fi imposed border for the entire duration of our observation. The veil has not grown. The song has not changed its nature. To break the 3 millennia conquered, the very foundation of our existence, on the basis of a metaphor, is an act of profound recklessness. The High Lord turned his massive body to face the Lumina, his posture one of rigid, unyielding aggression. Recklessness? I call it prudence. I call it survival. We, the Cathar, remember the Ravagers. We remember the silence that preceded their arrival. We remember the worlds that fell before we even knew we were at war. That enemy also came from the unexplored voids, a silent enigma that revealed its nature only when its jaws were at our throats. Are we to make the same mistake again? Are we to wait until human ships appear over our homeworlds, their strange song turning to a funeral dirge? We will not. A slow, dry, rustling sound drew the chamber's attention to the alcove of the Silthrin. Matriarch Illyria, her body a living monument of ancient wood and symbiotic fungi, shifted her weight. When she spoke, her voice was the whisper of wind through petrified forests, ancient and weary. The cost of that war, the High Lord speaks of the Ravagers, but does he truly remember? Does he remember the silence of 1,000 worlds, the stellar nurseries extinguished, the 24 member species of this concordance who are now only dust and memory? We forged this peace from the ashes of a galaxy. We swore an oath that the ambition or fear of one would never again plunge the many into darkness. The concordance is not a tool for preemptive war. It is a shield against it. If you strike at the humans, you do not break them. You break us. You shatter the very idea that has kept us safe for longer than most of our species have been spacefaring. Vorlag's mandibles clicked in a gesture of Cathar dismissal. A shield that blinds us is no shield at all. The past is a lesson, matriarch, not a cage. We honor the fallen by ensuring no new names are added to their number. The humans are a potential plague, and we are the surgeons who must cut it out before it festers. I have brought this to the floor for a vote, as is my right. The Cathar Protectorate and our allies formally propose the unilateral sanction. We will assemble a fleet under the authority of the Concordance. We will approach the Vale of Sol and deliver a final ultimatum. If they do not lower their shield and submit to a full inspection, we will dismantle it by force. We will discover the truth of what lies within, one way or another. The chamber fell into a deeper, more profound silence. The unilateral sanction was a clause in the Concordance Charter that had never been invoked. It was a measure designed for an undeniable, galaxy-wide threat, a last resort that granted a single member species the authority to act on behalf of the whole. To use it against a species that had committed no overt act of aggression was a perversion of its intent. It was, in essence, a declaration of war, sanitized by bureaucracy. Xylos's light pulsed with agitation. This is a corruption of our most sacred laws. The evidence is circumstantial, the threat theoretical. You are asking the Concordance to sacrifice its soul out of fear of a shadow. We cannot know their minds. Perhaps their isolation is born of a different philosophy. Perhaps they fear us. Perhaps their song is precisely what it appears to be, a cultural expression of a species so advanced they consider the entire electromagnetic spectrum their canvas. To answer art with violence is the act of a barbarian. If their art is a shield that can repulse a star-class energy probe, then it is the most effective armor ever conceived, Vorlag retorted, his voice dripping with scorn. And anything that can be used as armor can be used as a weapon. I will not stand by while my people's safety is gambled on the hope that this silent, unknown power is composing a symphony rather than sharpening a blade. The vote must be called. The central dais hummed, and the Keeper of the Conquered, a being of pure data that existed within the station's core, projected its query into the minds of the delegates. The amber light of the chamber dimmed, and each alcove began to glow, either with the stark white of ascent or the deep crimson of dissent. The chamber became a constellation of opposing stars. The Cathar and their martial allies, the stone-like Gorn, the insectoid Trax, lit up in a cascade of white. The Lumina, the Silthrin, and the more philosophical and trade-oriented species glowed a defiant red. The hall was split, a galaxy divided by fear and principle. For a long, agonizing moment, the colors warred, the balance shifting as the unaligned powers cast their votes. A cluster of systems near the Cathar border, long under their military protection, flickered from red to white. A trade consortium, fearing the economic disruption of a new Cold War, followed suit. The final tally solidi. White light narrowly, but decisively, overpowered the red. The Keeper's voice, devoid of emotion, echoed through the chamber. The unilateral sanction is passed. The Cathar Protectorate is granted authority to act in the name of the Concordance. The 3 millennia conquered is suspended. The last word hung in the air, a physical weight. The amber light in the chamber seemed to grow colder. Matriarch Illyria closed her ancient eyes, a single resinous tear tracing a path down her bark-like cheek. Speaker Xylos's form dimmed, its light shrinking inward as if in pain. The 3,000-year peace had not ended with a bang, but with a vote. A quiet, procedural, and utterly catastrophic decision made in a silent, beautiful room. High Lord Vorlag stood taller, his form seeming to swell with the authority he now wielded. He gave a curt, formal nod to the assembly, his gaze sweeping over the dissenting red lights with something akin to pity. They were weak. They lacked the will to see the truth, but he would protect them, even from themselves. He turned and strode from the chamber, his heavy footfalls echoing like the first beats of a war drum. The great doors slid shut behind him, sealing the future. Outside the chamber, the armada was already beginning to gather, a swarm of dark, predatory shapes moving against the stardusted velvet of space. They were the instruments of the Concordance's will, the surgeons sent to excise a phantom tumor. Vorlag felt no triumph, only a grim, cold certainty. He was doing what was necessary. The galaxy would thank him when the silent song of the humans was finally replaced by the reassuring clarity of their surrender or the righteous thunder of their annihilation. The Cathar fleet did not travel through the chaotic, unpredictable currents of hyperspace. Theirs was the art of the fold, a brutal and direct manipulation of spacetime that tore a temporary, screaming rift between 2 points. It was violent, energy-intensive, and left a scar of decaying chronotons in its wake, but it was fast, impossibly fast. The journey from the Concordance capital of Ethel to the periphery of the Sol system took less than a single rotation. One moment, they were orbiting the glowing heart of the galaxy's government. The next, they were adrift in the silent, unnerving presence of the Veil. Vorlag stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Will. It was less a command center and more a temple to Cathar martial philosophy. Polished, gunmetal gray walls angled sharply, designed to deflect internal blasts. The crew, clad in exoskeletal armor, moved with a disciplined, silent economy of motion. There were no comfortable chairs, only support stanchions to which one could brace during high-velocity maneuvers. Everything was hard, practical, and lethal. Before him, the main viewscreen was filled with the shimmering, impossible curtain of the human shield. It was more beautiful up close, and that made Vorlag even more certain of its perfidy. It was a fluid, dynamic aurora of colors that defied description, swirling in intricate patterns that seemed to respond to their presence. And through it all, the song. On the bridge of the Iron Will, it was not a faint whisper, but a pervasive, resonant hum that vibrated in the very plating of the ship. The ship's analytical engines screamed in frustration, trying to find a pattern, a code, a weakness. They found only layers upon layers of what could only be described as harmony. "Status report," Vorlag growled, his gaze fixed on the Veil. His subcommander, a younger Cathar named Grak, stepped forward. "Lord, all ships have exited the fold. Formation is stable. The Veil's energy output is astronomical. It exceeds the output of the system's star. We cannot scan through it. It is not reflecting our sensor pulses. It is absorbing them, integrating them. The patterns of light you see are in part a reaction to our own observation." Vorlag's mandibles tightened. A shield that fed on the energy used to probe it. Ingenious, devious. And the song. Still broadcasting. No change in amplitude or complexity. It is unnerving, Lord. The ship's psych dampeners are working at maximum capacity. Some of the junior crew reported feelings of tranquility. It was disrupting their combat focus. Tranquility, a weapon that disarmed you with peace. Vorlag's conviction hardened into granite. This was an affront to the Cathar way, to the very nature of conflict. War was meant to be faced with clarity and rage, not a placid, dreamlike state. "Broadcast the ultimatum," Vorlag commanded. "Concordance standard frequency. Full power, no encryption. Let their phantom chorus be drowned out by the voice of law." The ship's transmitter sent a powerful, focused beam of energy at the Veil. The message was simple and brutal. "By the authority of the Galactic Concordance, under the unilateral sanction, you are ordered to deactivate your energy field and surrender your military. Assets for inspection. You have one standard cycle to comply. Failure to comply will be interpreted as an act of war. This is your only warning." The beam struck the Veil and, like the sensor pulses, was simply absorbed. The shimmering light swirled more intensely where it had hit, the colors momentarily shifting to a deep, vibrant violet before settling back into their chaotic dance. The song did not falter. It did not change. It continued its endless, serene broadcast as if nothing had happened. They waited. The cycle passed in tense, disciplined silence on the bridge of the Iron Will. The fleet hung in space, a collection of jagged, brutalist sculptures poised before a masterpiece of abstract art. The ultimatum expired. Nothing changed. The humans offered no reply, no acknowledgement, only their infuriating, beautiful, silent song. They mock us, Grak hissed, his claws clenching and unclenching. They spit on the authority of the concordance. No, Vorlag said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. They test us. They believe their wall is impenetrable. They believe their song makes them untouchable. They have made a fatal miscalculation. He turned to his weapons officer. Target the veil, a focused barrage from the primary spinal lances. I do not want to destroy the system, not yet. I want to shatter their shield. I want to show them that there is no wall in this galaxy that Cathar will cannot break. A wave of acknowledgments rippled through the fleet. The colossal warships, some the size of small moons, maneuvered into position. Their central spines began to glow with a terrifying, incandescent energy as they charged their main weapons. The very fabric of space around the fleet seemed to thin, to warp under the strain of so much contained power. Fire, Vorlag commanded. A synchronized volley of pure, coherent energy, white-hot and brilliant, erupted from the fleet. Dozens of beams, each capable of cracking a planet's crust, converged on a single point on the veil's surface. The impact was not an explosion. It was a moment of profound, unnatural silence. The human song stopped. For the first time since the Concordance had discovered this system, there was only the cold, empty hum of the void. The silence was more shocking, more terrifying than any sound. On the bridge of the Iron Will, the crew flinched as if struck. The sudden absence of the song was a physical blow, a pressure change in the soul. Even Vorlag felt a momentary, dizzying sense of loss. Then the veil responded. The point where the beams had struck did not shatter. It did not break. It began to dissolve. The swirling colors did not fly apart. They simply receded. Like a curtain being drawn back, the entire system-spanning sphere of energy contracted, pulling back from the Cathar fleet back towards the inner planets. It folded in on itself, shrinking with a calm, deliberate speed, revealing what it had hidden for so long. The Cathar fleet watched, their weapons cooling, their crews stunned into stillness. The Sol system was laid bare, and it was nothing like they had expected. There was no vast, waiting armada. There were no orbital fortresses bristling with weapons. Instead, they saw worlds of stunning beauty. A vibrant blue marble swirled with white clouds, a ringed gas giant of majestic size. Orbiting them were structures of breathtaking elegance, delicate lacework rings that gleamed in the light of the yellow star, vast habitats glowing with the green of Terran life. It was a picture of profound, advanced, and undeniable peace. And moving from the orbit of the third planet, accelerating towards them with a grace that belied its speed, was a single, small vessel. It was unarmed. Its energy signature was that of a diplomatic shuttle. On the bridge of the Iron Will, a proximity alert chimed, a soft, polite sound in the oppressive silence. "Lord," the communications officer reported, his voice trembling slightly, "the unidentified vessel is hailing us. They are broadcasting on all channels in our own language." Vorlag stared at the approaching ship, a seed of doubt, cold and sharp, planting itself in his gut for the first time. The silence, the peaceful vista, the single, unarmed ship, this was not the behavior of a cornered predator. This was something else, something he did not understand. "Put it on screen," he ordered. The image resolved. It was not a Cathar or a Lumina or any species Vorlag knew. It was a human, a female of the species by their biological markers. She was small, soft-featured, her skin pale, her hair a dark cascade over her simple, functional gray uniform. There was nothing intimidating about her. But her eyes, they were ancient. They held a weariness, a profound and fathomless sorrow that seemed utterly at odds with her calm, composed expression. She sat in a simple chair, the background a stark, white, undecorated room. She did not speak immediately. She simply looked at Vorlag, her gaze seeming to penetrate the screen, the hull of his ship, and the layers of his own certainty. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, clear, and carried the weight of a funeral eulogy. "This is Ambassador Ever of the Unified Human Mandate," she said, her Cathar pronunciation perfect, though tinged with a strange, soft accent. "To the commander of the Concordance fleet, I ask you only this. Do you have any idea what you have just done?" The question was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact, a question posed to a child who had just shattered a priceless artifact without understanding its value. Vorlag felt an unfamiliar flush of anger, an instinctive reaction to being condescended to. "I am High Lord Vorlag of the Cathar Protectorate, acting with the full authority of the Galactic Concordance," he boomed, trying to reclaim the momentum. "You have violated galactic law by remaining silent. You have constructed a forbidden energy screen. You will surrender now or we will. Your authority is irrelevant, the human Eva interrupted. Her voice did not raise. It remained as calm and steady as a frozen sea. Your laws are local ordinances. We were not ignoring you. We were protecting you. Vorlag let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Protecting us from what? Your art, your music. Eva's expression did not change, but the sorrow in her eyes deepened. The song, as you called it, was not music. It was a multifaceted containment algorithm, a dynamic, self-repairing cage of harmonic resonance. The veil was not a shield to keep you out. It was a prison wall designed to keep something in. A cold dread, far worse than the earlier doubt, began to seep into Vorlag's consciousness. On the bridge, the other Cathar were listening, their rigid discipline faltering as they processed her words. A prison for what? Vorlag demanded, his voice losing some of its bluster. For the echo, Eva said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The remnant, the last dormant spore of the entity that was responsible for what your histories call the Age of Ash. The bridge of the iron went utterly, deathly silent. Every Cathar on board knew the legends. The Ravagers, the enemy that had come from the void, that had consumed stars and driven entire species mad before they were annihilated. An enemy whose origins and nature were lost to time, remembered only as a force of pure, mindless destruction. Eva continued, her calm voice narrating a history that dwarfed the Concordance's own. Humanity is not from this galactic arm. We are refugees. We arrived in your galaxy centuries ago, fleeing the final death of our own. We were not fleeing a war. We were fleeing a plague, a form of non-sentient, physics-altering corruption that we call the static. It unravels reality. It consumes information, matter, and energy, converting it into a state of absolute, chaotic null entropy. It does not kill, it erases. She paused, letting the concept settle into their minds. We traced its path across the void between galaxies. We are a race of janitors and wardens following in its wake, cleaning up its messes, containing its outbreaks. When we arrived here, our deep-range sensors detected a final, dormant pocket of it. Here, in your space. Your Ravagers were not a species. They were the first victims of the static in this galaxy. It infected their star system, warped their minds into instruments of its own expansion, and then when their usefulness was over, it consumed them. The great war that followed, the war that led to your concordance, was not a war against an empire. It was a desperate, panicked extermination of the infected. You burned the disease, but you did not kill the virus. A small, inert sample of it was left here, entombed in the gravity well of a dead star. Vorlag felt the floor of his bridge shift beneath him. He was looking at his own species, most foundational myth, and this small, soft creature was rewriting it into a footnote in a much larger, more terrifying story. We found it, Eva said, and we did what our ancestors have done for millennia. We contained it. We built the veil. We wove the song, a cage of pure mathematics and harmony to keep the chaotic static dormant. It required the entire energy output of our system and the constant, focused computational power of our entire civilization to maintain it. We could not speak to you. We could not leave. Our every resource, our every thought was dedicated to maintaining that prison. We condemned ourselves to isolation to keep your galaxy safe from a horror you had forgotten you ever faced. Her gaze hardened, just for a moment, and for the first time Vorlag saw a flicker of something other than sorrow in her eyes. It was the cold, hard fury of a scientist whose life's work has just been smashed by a fool. Your fleet, she said, her voice precise and cutting, just fired the most powerful weapons in your arsenal and punched a hole through the wall of a Supermax Pris. You did not break our shield. You broke the lock on the cage. As if on cue, every alarm on the bridge of the iron began to scream at once. The tactical display, which had been showing a clean, orderly view of the Sol system, was now flashing with red alerts. A new sensor reading was appearing at the edge of the system, near the location of a charted black dwarf. Report, Vorlag roared, tearing his eyes away from the human's face. Lord, the sensor officer cried out, his voice pitched high with panic. There's something emerging from the dead star's gravity well, a region of nothing. It's not a shadow. It's not an energy field. All sensors that pass through it return null readings. It's expanding. On the main view screen, a corner of the starfield simply vanished. It was not obscured. The stars did not dim. They were just gone, replaced by a patch of perfect, featureless black that seemed to drink the light around it. It was a hole in the universe. The static. Vorlag turned back to the screen, his mind reeling. The magnitude of his mistake was so vast, so cosmically catastrophic that he could not fully grasp it. He had not declared war on a reclusive neighbor. He had, with the full backing of the Concordance, just potentially unleashed the apocalypse that had created their civilization in the first place. The 3,000-year peace had ended. The aliens had declared war, and the silent, internal scream in Vorlag's mind was, "Oops, there goes humanity. There goes the Cathar, there goes everything." Eva was still watching him, her expression now one of grim resignation. "The containment is breached. The algorithm is collapsing. The static is awake. It will begin to feed on the ambient energy of this system, and then it will spread. We have been holding it back for 500 of your years. Now, High Lord Vorlag, our vigil is over, and because of you, your war has just begun." Her transmission ended, leaving Vorlag alone on his bridge with the blaring of alarms and the sight of reality beginning to fray at the edges. The news of what had transpired in the Sol system did not so much arrive at the Concordance capital as it detonated. Ambassador Eva's final, damning statement, along with the unfiltered sensor readings from the Cathar fleet, was broadcast by the humans on every Concordance channel simultaneously. The truth bypassed all official reports, all attempts by the Cathar to control the narrative. It flooded the infosphere of 100 worlds in a single, horrifying wave. In the grand chamber on Ethel, the emergency session was a stark contrast to the grimly formal debate that had preceded it. Panic, a sentiment the Concordance had not experienced on a collective level for millennia, was a palpable force in the room. The amber light seemed sickly now, the obsidian floor a bottomless pit. Delegates shouted, their voices a cacophony of fear and accusation. The holographic display at the center of the room no longer showed the beautiful, shimmering veil. It now showed a live feed of the expanding void, the patch of absolute nothingness that was steadily, inexorably growing, consuming asteroids and stray comets, erasing them from existence. Speaker Xylos of the Lumina hovered at the center of the chaos, its form pulsing with a desperate, focused light. "Order! There must be order! Recriminations are a luxury we cannot afford. The past is done. The High Lord's mistake is now our shared reality." A delegate from the Trax hive, its chitinous plates rattling with agitation, buzzed, "Mistake." This was not a mistake, it was arrogance. The Cathar have doomed us all with their paranoia. They must be held accountable. Matriarch Illyria's ancient voice cut through the noise, not with volume, but with its sheer, weary weight. "Accountability will come, but first comes survival. The humans, they said they were wardens. They have studied this static. They are our only source of knowledge, our only hope." As if summoned by her words, the holographic display flickered. The image of the expanding void was replaced by the calm, sorrowful face of Ambassador Eva. A collective gasp went through the chamber. She was not broadcasting from her ship anymore. The background was different. It was a command center, filled with other humans moving with quiet, urgent purpose. "This is Ambassador Eva of the Unified Human Mandate, addressing the Galactic Concordance," she began, her voice as steady as before, but now laced with an undeniable urgency. "The initial expansion of the static is proceeding faster than our models predicted. Your fleet's weapon discharge did more than breach the containment. It acted as a massive energy infusion, a catalyst. It has fed the entity." She gestured to a display behind her, which showed a complex, terrifying simulation of the static's projected path. It was a creeping stain of black that would engulf the entire Sol system within a few rotations, and from Ere it would spread to the nearest star lanes, to the Cathar border worlds. "For 5 centuries, Eva continued, we have devoted our civilization to one task, containment. We have no standing army. Our warships were dismantled generations ago to provide the raw materials for the Veil's projectors. Our purpose has been singular, to hold the line. That has now failed. We cannot stop the static alone. We can, however, slow it, and with your help we may be able to fight it." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. They had expected condemnation, demands for reparations, perhaps even a declaration of vengeance from a species they had so grievously wronged. They had not expected an offer of alliance. Speaker Xylos moved forward, its light coalescing respectfully. "Ambassador, we have no words to express the depth of our error. The Concordance has failed in its most fundamental duty. We acted out of fear and ignorance. We offer our profound apologies, though we know they are inadequate." "Apologies are data for future ethical models, Speaker Xylos," Eva replied, a faint, sad smile touching her lips for the first time. "They are not a practical tool in the present crisis. We do not require your apology. We require your fleets. We require your industrial capacity. We require your knowledge of this galaxy. We have the theory, you have the resources. Separately, we will all be consumed. Together, we may have a chance." The apathetic shock in the room began to transmute into a fragile, desperate hope. Here was a species that had every right to abandon them to their fate, a species they had attacked without provocation, and they were offering not vengeance, but salvation. Their moral and ethical calculus was so far beyond the Concordance's understanding of retribution and power politics that it was humbling. From a darkened alcove, a figure stepped forward. It was High Lord Vorlag. He had returned from the Sol system with the first wave of retreating ships, his flagship bearing the scars of proximity to the static, patches of hull where the very atoms seemed to have lost their cohesion. His armor was dull, his posture stooped. The arrogant certainty was gone, replaced by a hollow, crushing shame. He walked to the center of the chamber and stood before the hologram of Eva, a titan before a ghost. He did not look at his fellow delegates. He looked only at her. "Ambassador," he began, his voice a low, broken rumble. "I am High Lord Vorlag. The failure was mine. I pushed the vote. I gave the order. The guilt for this cosmic atrocity, rests upon my soul." He lowered his massive head in the ultimate Cathar gesture of submission, a posture no High Lord had taken before the Concordance in its entire history. "My life is forfeit. I offer it to you, to your people, in whatever manner you see fit, but before I die, I pledge my people. The Cathar Protectorate and all its fleets are now yours to command. Our honor is shattered, but our weapons are sharp. We will serve as the vanguard in this war. We will be the shield you were forced to be for us. We will die to the last warrior to repay this debt." Eva listened, her expression unreadable. The chamber held its breath. They were witnessing the fall of one of the galaxy's great powers and the birth of a new, terrifying era. "Rise, High Lord Vorlag," Eva said, her voice soft but firm. "Your life is not useful to me as a forfeit. Your experience as a fleet commander, however, is. The Cathar value honor. Then let me offer you a path to reclaim it. The static is not a sentient enemy. It does not understand surrender or retribution. It is a force of nature, a fire in the dark. There is no glory in fighting it, only a grim, necessary duty. You sought to protect your people from a phantom threat. Now you will have the chance to protect all of us from a real one. Your guilt is your own to carry. Your service, however, is owed to the galaxy." Vorlag slowly raised his head, his multifaceted eyes shimmering with an emotion the Cathar rarely displayed. Humbled gratitude. He had expected execution. He was given a purpose. In that moment, the Galactic Concordance was reborn. It was no longer a council of bickering, suspicious states. It was an alliance forged in the fires of a shared existential threat, led by the very species they had sought to destroy. The old political lines dissolved, replaced by a single, desperate front against the encroaching darkness. In the cycles that followed, a new order emerged. Human scientists and engineers, freed from their duty of containment, began to work alongside the best minds of the Concordance. They established a joint command on Ethel, turning the heart of galactic politics into the nerve center of a war for survival. The Cathar fleets, their ferocity now tempered with a solemn purpose, formed the front lines, engaging the static not to destroy it, an impossible task, but to slow its expansion with targeted gravity distortions and enter. Jai sinks, buying time for the scientists to find a true weapon. The Lumina used their mastery of energy to create new sensor nets, attempting to understand the physics of the void. The Silthran delved into their most ancient records, searching for any mention, any myth, of a similar phenomenon from the galaxy's dawn. Humanity, for its part, was a revelation. They were calm, logical, and exhaustingly ethical. They shared their technology freely, withholding nothing. Their understanding of theoretical physics was centuries ahead of the Concordance. They thought in timelines that made even the long-lived Silthran feel short-sighted. They were a species shaped not by competition or expansion, but by the shared burden of a sacred, unending task. They were not warriors, but they were the most resilient beings any in the Concordance had ever met. They had endured 500 years of utter isolation, of a self-imposed prison sentence, without descending into madness or despair. They had held the line. One day, deep within the research division on Ethel, Ambassador Eva stood with Speaker Xylos and a now subdued High Lord Vorlag before a massive holographic display. They were analyzing the sound of the static, the faint quantum fluctuations at its event horizon. It was thought to be random, the background hiss of reality being unwritten. "We've been approaching this from the wrong perspective," a human technician said, her face pale with exhaustion and excitement. We've been trying to filter the noise out, but what if the noise is the message? She initiated a complex filtering program, one of humanity's own design. The chaotic static on the display began to shift. The program isolated certain wave patterns, inverted their frequencies, and stacked them against one another. Slowly, agonizingly, a pattern began to emerge from the chaos. It was not random. It was structured, faint, but undeniably artificial. "It's a signal," the technician whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's been buried in the static's quantum signature. It's impossibly old, far older than the Silthrin records, older than this galaxy's current stellar configuration." The signal was weak, degraded by eons of decay, but it was there. A final, desperate message left by a civilization that had been consumed by the static long before any of their species had even evolved. A warning, but it was more than that. As the last of the data was decoded, a string of coordinates appeared, projected in the center of the room. Eva, Xylos, and Vorlag stared at the coordinates. They did not point to a location within their galaxy. They did not even point to one of the neighboring dwarf galaxies. They indicated a precise point in the vast, terrifying emptiness of the intergalactic void. "A warning," Speaker Xylos resonated, its light pulsing with a new, deeper fear. "And a destination." "They were pointing the way," Vorlag rumbled, his strategic mind piecing it together. "Not to their home, to the source, or to a weapon, something they created or found that they thought could stop it." Eva walked closer to the holographic text, her reflection ghosting over the ancient symbols. The long, lonely vigil of humanity was over, but she now understood that it had just been the prelude. They had been the wardens of a single cell, unaware that they were living inside an infinite prison. Their struggle was not unique. Others, long dead and turned to dust, had fought this same enemy and lost. But in their final moments they had not despaired. They had left a message in a bottle, thrown into a sea of cosmic horror, hoping that someone someday would find it. She looked at the faces of her new allies, the humbled Cathar warrior and the wise Lumina philosopher. Their 3,000-year peace had been an illusion, a brief, blissful pocket of ignorance in a universe far more ancient and dangerous than they had ever conceived. Their war against the static was not the end of their history. It was the beginning of a new, far grander and more terrifying purpose. They were no longer just the inhabitants of a single galaxy. They were the inheritors of an ancient, forgotten war, and their next journey would take them out into the great, starless dark, chasing the ghost of a hope left by a dead civilization. The future of everything depended on what they would find there.